Welcome to the session on differential evolution. In this particular session, we will cover the introduction about the differential evolution. In differential evolution, rather than we say solutions or individual, we have vectors. So, we are going to use different kind of vectors for perturbing the solution in the feasible search space. So, as we can see that we will be having mutant vector, trial vector, and when we are generating such vectors, we have a selection operator which is going to select the best solution from the population or while comparing one vector to the another vector. After going through the introduction of differential evolution, so we call it as DE. So, we are going to understand this particular algorithm through an example. So, all working principle of DE we will understand through the starting with the initial population generation, followed by the evaluation of the population. Then we will create mutant vector followed by the trial vector, and then we will be performing some selection on these two newly generated vectors. We will go through this hand calculation for one generation, and the same set of solution we will be understanding through the graphical illustration. And finally, we will conclude this session. So, let us begin with the introduction now. In this introduction, as we know, as we can see here, the differential evolution is proposed by Stone and Price. In this particular paper, they have mainly targeted developing differential evolution for continuous spaces. In differential evolution, this DE draws ideas from, first of all, it is from the evolutionary computation technique. It is because it has a population of vectors. So, when we have multiple vectors or multiple solutions, these solutions they interact in some sort of operations and then they generate new solutions. We create while creating the new solution, we compare them and we keep the best solutions. So, similar procedure is followed in differential evolution. Moreover, as we know that since population based EC computation techniques inherits parallel search space property, as you can see here, this particular property will help us escaping the local minima. It is because when we are performing some operations for creating new vectors, so that operation is performed on the set of solution. In case if few solutions are trapped at the local minima, the other solutions will help these solution to come out from the local minima and move towards the global optima. Moreover, as it is mentioned in the paper that differential evolution draws an idea from Nelder and Mead's simplex search method. In this case, it is done by employing the information within the vector population to alter the subspace. So, as we know, in the simplex search method, if we consider for example two variable problem, in this case we consider n plus 1. So, basically 3 solutions. In these 3 solutions, we find what is the best solution based on the fitness value, what is the worst solution and what is the next to the worst solution. So, the idea of simplex search method is let us move away from the worst solution in such a way that we can improve these solution iteration by iteration. So, the same concept of using those vector operations is borrowed in differential evolution. So, as it can be seen that in differential evolution, each vector in the population is perturbed by adding the difference of two vectors, randomly chosen vectors from the population. So, in the slides which we will be discussing later, you can see that we are going to pick random solutions, making a difference of them, then adding to the third vector. So, the whole idea is to mutate the given vector in the population, so that we can generate a new solution in the population. Now, as it is given in the first paper that the DE was proposed by the author for the minimization of nonlinear and non-differentiable continuous space function. So, that was the main motive when DE was proposed. However, there are different variants of DE are available now that can not only solve such kind of a problem, but that can solve like mixed integer kind of a programming problem as well. As mentioned by the authors, DE require few control parameters. So, as we have understood that EC computation techniques need certain inputs to be set before running the algorithm. So, for DE also we need certain input parameters, but that number is quite small. Second, it is robust. Why? Because DE can be used for various kind of a problem to get an optimum solution. Similarly, it is easy to use because when we are randomly choosing vector and performing some kind of operation on it, you can see that those operations are simple, say vector operations. So, that's why it is easy to understand and we can implement as well. And last but not the least, the function evaluation can be done in parallel. So, that is the advantage as we have discussed with evolutionary computation technique. So, that advantage is also available with DE, in which when we have multiple solutions or vectors. So, when we are going to calculate the objective function or constraint and assigning a fitness, so these operations are independent. So, these set of operation on one solution and another solutions, they are independent to each other, and therefore, we can perform this function evaluation for solution 1 and solution 2 in parallel. Now, let us understand what are the features with the differential evolution. Now, as we can see that DE starts with the population of a vectors and or we say solutions that is similar to GA and PSO, and that is what we understand, that evolutionary computation techniques are population based meta heuristic techniques. But unlike to GA and a PSO, each vector is perturbed by adding the difference of the two randomly chosen vector from the population. So, that is the new thing, the way the new solution or a new vector is created in differential evolution. There are three kinds of vectors in DE. Mainly we refer them as a target vector, mutant vector and the trial vector. So, what are those vectors? As we can see, the target vector is the one which is being perturbed. So, we are going to choose one particular vector or a solution and we have to change this solution using some operation. Then comes the mutant vector. This vector is generated by adding weighted difference between the two randomly chosen vectors to a third vector from the population. So, as you can see, the multiple vectors are involved. By using vector operations, we are going to generate the mutant vector. And the last is the trial vector. As we can see in the trial vector, it is generated by mixing the variables of the target vector and the mutant vector. So, this vector is generated when we are comparing the fitness and we will be exchanging the variables between the target and a trial vector. So, in this case the probability will come into the picture by which we will be exchanging these two, we will be exchanging the variable between these two vectors. Now, let us come to the nomenclature. It is because In the original paper, some different nomenclature is used. As of now, we are using certain kind of a nomenclature, and we will be understanding a differential evolution using our nomenclature. So, let us see what are the parameters that are being used with DE, and those parameters are represented in our generalized representation. So, let us begin with the population member. So, as you can see that in both the cases we are representing the members as I. The population size, the second one, in canonical DE, it is represented as NP. However, in our representation it is represented as N. So, N will be represented as a population size. Similarly, we have the counter. So, this is called generation counter. It is represented as a G in DE, but we are representing as a small t. The maximum number of generation, this is represented by G max. In our representation, it is represented by capital T. Similarly, a target vector. Now, as you can see, this target vector in the gth iteration, the I and G are written in the subscript of x. However, in our representation, we write I in the subscript and the generation number T in the superscript. And the mutant vector, so the mutant vector for T plus 1, again in the DE representation, in the subscript you can see I and G plus 1. However, in our representation, in the subscript we are writing the solution, and in the superscript it is written as the T plus 1th generation. So, Vi T plus 1 will become our mutant vector. Thereafter, we have a trial vector, and again in DE they have used I and a G plus 1 in the subscript. In our representation, we are using U, but in the subscript is I, and in the superscript it is T plus 1. The vector size in DE is represented as capital D, but as we know, we take this as a column vector, and the size of the column vector is decided by the small n. There is a crossover probability rate. So, in DE it is represented as a CR. We will be understanding this as a PC, which is similar to the probability of crossover. So, what we are going to do here is the representation which we are following in our generalized format, that we are going to follow to understand how differential evolution works. Now, at the bottom we can see the canonical DE uses, say suppose this is the vector here xij, this is represented and the component of this vector. So, basically the values of the decision variables are given, and again it is a column vector here. In our format, we are writing xit, and this is xi1 to xin. So, we are writing these 1 and n in the subscript of I, just to make sure, telling that we are talking about the variable of ith vector in tth generation. So, let us start with the mutant vector. So, the purpose of the mutant vector is to create a new solution that will be exploring the search space. So, as we can see, we are going to create new vector for the exploration. Now, for each target vector, so we are going to take vector one by one. So, let us take ith vector. So, the mutant vector Vit plus 1 is generated as you can see equation number 1, that it depends on choosing the vector 1, then R2 vector, then R3 vector. What are these vectors? These are the randomly chosen vectors from the current population. We have to make sure when we are selecting 3 vectors randomly, they should be different from each other. Now, if we look at the equation number 1 here, the second part you can see, this second part represents the difference between the two vector, that is multiplied by the scaling factor f, and finally we are adding this component into the first vector. These are the simple vector operations which are performed to generate the mutant vector vi t plus 1. While selecting R1, R2 and R3, basically 3 random vectors, we have to make sure that these 3 vectors should not, any of them should not be the same as our target vector. So, therefore, if we want to start differential evolution, we need at least 4 members to start with. So, as we have written here, the population size of DE should be greater than or equals to 4 to start with this algorithm. Now, the scaling factor in the formula number 1, the factor f, generally we take it's a scalar factor and we take any value between 0 to 2. Now, what is the effect of this factor f? As we can see in the equation number 1 here, when we are finding the difference between the 2 vectors and when multiplying the scaling factor f, this is controlling the amplification of the differential variation. Since we are subtracting these 2 vectors, so how much effect we are going to use it? If the value of f is smaller than 1, this means that we are going to take less effect of these 2 vectors, the difference of these 2 vectors. However, when we take f greater than 1, then we are taking more component or the larger component of the difference of these 2 vectors. Other implementation imposes different limits on f. So, this was the original implementation shown in the paper as we have seen in the initial slide. So, that says that if we are going to use a difference of the 2 vector, we can use the value of f between 0 and 2. Now, here there is an important note I have written at the bottom, that in this mutation it involves more than one vector. Now, let us remember that when we are working with say genetic algorithms, in that case we understood crossover and a mutation operator as, in crossover operator we need more than one solutions. It is only because these solutions they exchange some information and create new solutions. So, as and when we need more than one solution, that operator was referred to as a crossover operator. Similarly, when we are perturbing a solution, so only one solution is involved, so that operator we considered as a mutation operator. However, in differential evolution, the mutant vector which is generated using the mutation operator as referred in the paper, that it involves more than one vector. Now, looking at the equation number 1, we can see that we need R1, R2 and R3, meaning that we need more than one vectors to generate a mutant vector vi t plus 1. Let us understand the mutant vector graphically. As we can see here, we have the target vector which is represented in a blue color and randomly chosen 3 vector, say R1 and R2 and R3. So, the green color and the red color and the cyan color, we have used 3 different colors to use 3 kinds of randomly chosen vector for a target vector I. Now, as we know that we are going to use a difference, as you can see this particular difference in the vector, we are going to use it to create a mutant vector. Now, looking at the figure on the right hand side, we have now multiplied with the f, and that f with the difference in the vector is creating the mutant vector vi t plus 1. So, this mutant vector and the target vector, both of them will be used to create a trial vector. Now, let us come to the trial vector. This trial vector is created using similar to the crossover concept. The purpose is, if we are using a trial vector, that should help us in maintaining the diversity into the population. Therefore, as we can see, the purpose is to create a new vector for diversity in the population. Now, trial vector UIT plus 1 is generated as, now before we explain this particular equation number 2, you can see that we are writing j here. So, the purpose of a j is, this is going to be our jth decision variable. So, variable by variable, we are going to take a component either from the mutant vector or from the target vector, and in that case, while going through one by one, we will be creating the trial vector. So, let us see the equation number 2 now. It says that, say for the jth variable, if the random number is smaller than PC or j is equals to r n b r I. So, we will see what is that. Then we are going to take a jth component from the mutant vector. If the random number is greater than PC and j is not equals to r n b r I, we are going to take the jth variable component from the target vector. So, here the random number is generated between 0 to 1, PC is the crossover rate, or we can say the probability of a crossover. Now, let us come to RNBRI. This is randomly chosen index between 1 to n. Now, you can see these are the index we are used for the decision variable. It means that we are creating a random number, and as and when this random number is same as the decision variable which we are taking, then we are copying that particular decision variable from the mutant vector to the trial vector. The only purpose of this particular condition is that it ensures that the trial vector, so the jth component of trial vector, get at least one parameter from the mutant vector. So, that is the whole purpose, that we should get something from the mutant vector while creating a trial vector. So, let us see graphically how this trial vector is generated now. So, in this particular example, you can see on the left hand side, we have the target vector, we have the mutant vector, and this vector is made of 8 number of variables. Different color codings are used here to understand how this trial vector is generated. Looking at the figure on the right hand side, so suppose for the first variable, so the random number is more than PC. So, this means that we are going to copy the variable, the first variable from the target variable. Suppose for the second component, random number is smaller than PC. So, we are going to copy the second variable from the mutant vector, and similarly if we are going to follow, we will get a trial vector. Now, here you can see in the final component of the trial vector, it is made of blue color and the green color. So, the change in the blue and a green color means that this particular vector will be having different set of decision variable values, and when we are changing it, definitely it will be representing a new particular vector or a solution in the population. After understanding the mutant vector and the trial vector, now we have to select which is better. So, in this case we have this selection. In this particular selection, the purpose is we have to decide whether a trial vector can replace its target vector and enter in the population. So, since we have generated the trial vector, we are going to compare with its target vector. So, as we know, when we are going to compare, we generally compare with the help of fitness value. So, the fitness value of both the vectors, we have already calculated it. Now, the canonical DE uses some greedy selection criteria for selection of one vector that to be included in the population. So, here we are assuming it's a minimization problem. So, let us look at the formula number 3 here. It says that the target vector for the next generation population, which is t plus 1, it will come if the fitness of the trial vector is better than the target vector. So, let us copy the trial vector. Otherwise, we will be copying the target vector as it is into the next generation. Now, what you can find here, or we can understand from here, that we are taking the trial vector and the target vector, and we are comparing these two solutions and choosing the best. However, if we want to make a small change into this algorithm, we can use some other selection criterion. Now, as we can see at the bottom, as an example I have written, we can use mu plus lambda selection strategy, meaning that we already have a target vector with us. We can generate all the trial vectors using mutant vectors. So, now we have target plus trial vectors. We can combine both of them, and then we can choose the best n solution for the next population, and that is what mu plus lambda strategy says that. So, this is the another way of selection we can incorporate with the DE to see whether the performance of the DE is improved for certain class of a problem or not. There are different variants of DE available in the literature. So, generally those variants are can be differentiated with respect to a form, as we can see in this here, that the following notation is used, which is represented as DE x, y and z. So, here x will be representing a vector that to be mutated. So, for example, we can either use random or the best. Y is the number of differences vector that can be used with DE, and Z will be representing the crossover scheme. So, the algorithm which we have gone through, it also has had some version. So, what is that? As we can see, the algorithm which we have just discussed, it has DE, random basically. This is 1 means one difference and bin means binomial. So, let us see that. So, random means we are going to choose a vector for a mutation. So, we selected R1. 1 means a single difference vector is used. So, we have used a difference between R2 minus R3. So, this is the one difference between these two vectors. And BIN, this is the crossover is according to the independent binomial experiment, and that is why we took it as a PC here. So, what could be the other variant for a DE? In this case, suppose we take DE base to bin. How we can understand what kind of DE it is? So, the first quantity says, so the first term here it is best. So, you can see in the formula here VIT plus 1 is equals to x best. So, meaning that in the given population, we will be finding which vector has the best fitness, that vector will be chosen here. Then we have plus f, and then now we are using 4 vectors in which there are 2 differences used. So, you can see that the 2 number, so DE best 2 is going to represent there are 2 vector differences in the formula, and BIN is the same as what we have understood earlier. So, the mutate the best individual in the population and uses of 2 difference vector that represents DE best to win. And similarly, in the literature, if we change this particular notation, accordingly we are going to get another kind of a DE, that is the variant of the original DE which we have understood it. Now, we have come to the stage when we can see how this DE algorithm will work on an example. So, we are going to start this DE algorithm with the help of a Rosenbrook example now. Before going that, let us see the flow chart of differential evolution. In this particular flow chart, we can see that we start with the random initial population. So, the vectors that will be generated randomly as we have done it earlier. Thereafter, we are going to evaluate the population and assigning the fitness. So, here since the problem which we will be solving, we will see that what fitness we are going to assign. Now, come to the first decision box here. So, this decision box says that t is smaller than and equals to capital T, meaning that the number of generation, if it is smaller than and equals to capital T, go ahead. So, yes, so suppose we are at the first iteration here. Now, we are going into the second decision box. As you can see, this decision box will be running for every vector in the population. So, let us choose, we have the ith decision vector. So, for that particular target vector, so the vector I will be referred as a target vector. So, first we will be finding the mutant vector here. So, the mutant vector formula is known to us. Thereafter, we are going to find a target trial vector UIT plus 1 using target as well as mutant vector. Since this trial vector can be a new one, so we have to evaluate it and assign a fitness to our trial vector. Thereafter, we will be performing a selection between the target vector XIT and the trial vector UIT plus 1. Then finally, we are going to increase the counter by 1, and this loop will be working till all the vectors in the populations are undergone through the operations as creating mutant vector, trial vector and then selection. Thereafter, once the population is done, then we will be moving in the upper loop on number of a generation. So, we increase the counter by 1. So, this process will be followed till all the number of generation is more than the maximum number of generation. Once it is done, we terminate the algorithm and report the optimum solution. After understanding the flow chart of differential evolution, now let us fit DE with our generalized framework of EC computing technique. Now, in this case, we can see that we have this step 1, which is the solution representation. So, as of now, we are assuming that we are using DE for continuous function for real value and for the real values of x1, x2, x3 and x4. Thereafter, we have to give certain input to the DE. So, as we know that for evolutionary computation technique, we have to set certain input that will be given to the differential evolution. Thereafter, in a step number 3, we initialize the random population, and in step number 4, we evaluate the population. As can be seen, evaluation of the population means we will be evaluating the objective function, we will be evaluating the constraint, and finally, we will be assigning the fitness to each vector. So, as we remember, in DE, the solution is referred to as a vector. Now, in a step number 5, we are in the standard loop of generation. Inside this particular loop, we have one for loop. This for loop works for the number of vectors that is represented by capital N. So, we are going to take vector one by one. So, those vectors will be considered as a target vector, and so for that one, first we will be creating a mutant vector for the target vector I. The operation is referred as a mutation. Then in step number 8, we will be finding a trial vector UIT plus 1 for target vector I. This operation is referred as crossover operator. Since a new vector is generated, so in step number 9, we will evaluate this new vector, and step number 10, we have the survival stage. This survival stage will be working on two solutions only, that is the target vector and the trial vector UIT plus 1. Whosoever is having a better fitness is selected for the next generation. And in the step number 12, we increase the counter by 1, and the loop over the number of generation from 5 to 13 will terminate once the small t is greater than the capital T. Now, let us understand the working principle of differential evolution. So, we have taken an example of Rosenbrock function. We can see on the top that we want to minimize the function, and the two variable Rosenbrock function is given here, and the variable bound for the Rosenbrock function is considered as between -5 to +5 for both the variables. Now, the figure on the left hand side, we have drawn the third axis as a logarithmic of the function. You can see x1 and the x2 plane at the bottom. Now, the surface, you can see that this particular surface generate the contours, which shows that we have many local optimum solution for the given problem. However, the global optimum solution is at 1 and a 1, and the function value at this global optimum solution is 0. So, let us solve this problem using differential evolution. So, we have to generate the initial population first. So, let us assume that we have a population size of 8. So, as you remember, DE need at least 4 number to start with. So, we are taking 8 as a number, and the generation counter is considered as first. So, what we did is we created a random population, as you can see in the table, that x1 and x2 values for each index I is generated between -5 to +5. Once this initial random population is generated, now we have to evaluate the population. For evaluating the population, the objective function is given to us. Now, let us take a solution number 1. For this particular solution, the column vector or the variable values are given here. By including these values, we will get the function value is 357.154. If we continue to fitting the values of the variable for vector 1, vector 2, vector 3 till vector 8, we are going to get the fitness of all the vectors. So, as can be seen in this particular table here, the third column represents the fitness or the function value of all the vectors. So, here we are assuming that the fitness function is the same as the objective function value. So, we are considering the function value as our fitness in this particular example. Now, now we are in the standard loop of the number of a generation. Since this is the first generation, so we continue and we move inside the loop of generation. So, we are going to do the operations now vector by vector. So, let us take, so first operation is the mutant vector. So, the formula is given to us, which is represented as the vector operation. So, the difference between the vector and adding to the third vector. Now, for performing the mutant vector, we are assuming that f is 0.5. Now, let us see the table now. For the target vector 1, we have chosen 3 vector randomly. So, these are 7, 3, 2. So, what we did inside the population, we chose 3 vectors randomly. Those are 7, 3 and a 2. Similarly, as you can see in the table, for target vector 2, the other 3 vectors are chosen. So, we are following the rule that I should not be equals to R1, R2 and R3, as well as R1, R2 and R3 should be different from each other. So, if we follow the same thing, then we are going to get a table of random numbers for each target vector. So, let us go one by one. Let us choose the target vector 1. For the target vector 1, R1 is 7, R2 is 3 and R3 is 2. So, that you can make it out from this particular table. Now, we are going to calculate the mutant vector for this target vector 1. So, it is simply the vector operations, as you can see. So, we are including the value here in the column vector form, and then finally, we will get the value or the mutant vector 1 for the target vector 1. Just to explain one more time, let us do the same calculation on target vector 2. So, for this target vector 2, we have R1, R2 and R3, that is we have selected from this particular table as 3, 4 and 6. By including their vector values or the column decision variable values here in the column vector form, I can find what is the value of the mutant vector for target vector 2, and finally, we will get the value here. So, in this particular process, we are going to take one target vector at a time and then creating the mutant vector for the same target vector. Now, here when we will be performing it, we are going to get a table as mutant vector. So, there are two observations here. So, let us see the column number 2 here. Now, the column number 2 is represented in a red color, is shown in the red color. It is because look at the x2 value. This x2 value is actually greater than 5, and in our problem we considered x1 and x2 should lie between -5 to +5. So, in this case, when the variable is going out of the bound, we will keep this particular variable on the bound. So, that is the first observation, that the operations which we did earlier, that can make our vector out of the bound of the variable. Second observation is shown in the third column, that is represented in the green color. Now, in this green color, what you can see that we started with a fitness with initial population which have certain fitness. After performing the after calculating the mutant vector, you can see the fitness has already improved for vector 1, and that is what we expect, is that when we are performing the operation, our solution should improve and should move to the optimum solution. So, the mutant vector can create a better solution for us, and it can create bad solution as well. So, as a modified table, as we can see on the right hand side, the values corresponding to the vector 3, you can see that the x2 component is kept on a 5, and accordingly the fitness value is also changed. With this modified mutant vectors, now let us create the trial vectors. Now, as you can see here, the target trial vectors will be made with the help of every variable called j. So, using this particular formula as given in the top, we will be generating the trial vectors. For creating the trial vectors, we are assuming the probability of crossover or a crossover rate is 0.5. So, that says that 50% should come from the mutant vector and 50% should come from the target vector. So, let us see how. Now, in this case, as we know, we are solving two variable problem, that is x1 and x2. So, for both the variables, we are creating random numbers, as you can see in the table. So, for every vector 1 to 8, we are creating random numbers to find out which particular component of the decision variable will be copied into the trial vector. So, let us take the trial vector 1. In this trial vector, we have already computed the mutant vector and we had the target vector. Now, let us look at the random number. So, random number 1 is 0.459, as you can see from the table as well. So, the first random number is 0.459. Now, since this random number is smaller than PC, which is 0.5, and looking at the formula on the top, we are going to get a component. So, the first variable value we are copying from the mutant vector to the our trial vector. So, the first variable will be minus 0.793. Now, let us do the same calculation for the variable number 2. So, the random number is now 0.122, and from the table also you can see the same random number is taken here. Now, since this random number is smaller than probability of a crossover or PC, we can take the second component of the mutant vector to the second component of the trial vector. So, this is 0.737. This is we did it for creating a trial vector 1. Let us perform the same calculation for the trial vector 2. As you can see in the table, the random numbers are given here. So, these random numbers we are going to use them. For trial vector 2, we have the mutant vector V2 and we have a target vector X2. In this case, as we have seen, the first random number for the first variable is 0.268, which is less than the PC, meaning that the first variable from the mutant vector will be copied to the trial vector. Similarly, if we are going to do the same thing for the second variable, so here random number is 0.684. Now, this random number is more than PC. It suggests that we have to take the second component from the target vector into the trial vector. So, the component as you can see here. So, what we can see that this target trial vector can take a component either from the mutant vector or from the target vector. By following those set of random numbers, we can thus generate the trial vector. Now, looking at the table here, this particular table says that based on the random number, these trial vectors for every solution we have created. So, the fitness value is shown for our reference, and we can see that the best solution was preserved, but it is random. In this case, we have preserved it, but it can be distorted or it can be changed to some other value. Now, we have created a trial vector. So, at this particular stage, we have the target vector as well as the trial vector. Now, we have to choose the best, and therefore, we need a selection. So, in this selection operator, we are using the greedy selection of a DE as we have understood from the earlier slide, which says that the target vector for the t plus 1 generation, that is the next generation, is equals to the trial vector if the fitness of the trial vector is better than the fitness of target vector. Otherwise, we are going to copy the same target vector. Here, we are assuming that the fitness value is the same as the function value. So, this assumption we are using it, and we will be choosing the solution one by one. Let us see how. So, for the first solution, we will be comparing the target and the trial vector. Looking at the fitness, we can see that we have to select the trial vector for solution number 1. Now, look at the solution number 2 here. In this case, the fitness value of the target vector is better than the trial vector. So, this is going to be selected. This process we will continue, and we will get this kind of a table here. Here, you can see all the green particular cells says that which particular vector we are going to select. Here some different color such as in 6 and 8 are shown. It is because our target vector as well as our trial vector, both of them are same. Since both of them are same, we can select any one. So that is why I am just showing as a representation purpose that anyone can be selected, because it is not going to change our member. So the new target vector for the next generation you can see on the right hand side, and the vector components are shown in the column number 2 and their fitness values are shown in the third column of the table. Just at the end, let us compare the initial population versus the new target vectors after one generation. Now, as you can see, the left hand table represents the initial population and the new target vector after one generation is shown on the right hand side. The observation is that we have now two solutions which is better than the best solution in the initial population, and that is what we expect from differential evolution, that the way we perform the mutation in the form of mutant vector as well as crossover in the form of trial vector, these operations should support DE to improve the solution generation by generation, and after few generation we should expect that these target vector will be close to the optimum solution. Now, the process which we have gone through using our hand calculation, now let us see how these solution graphically are moving in a one generation. So, we are starting with the graphical example. Now, let us look at this figure. This is the initial population. In this initial population, all these vectors are generated randomly in the plane of x1 and x2. Once we evaluated that, and then we are inside the generation loop, the first operation which we do is the mutation in the form of mutant vector. So, let us take an example of first target vector 1. Now, look at the figure here. The target vector 1 is here. For this particular vector, we selected R1 as 7, R2 as 3 and R3 as 2. So, what we are going to do is, we are first finding the difference between the two vector, which is x3 minus x2, and then multiplying with the f, we are adding this vector to the vector 7. That is going to give me my first mutant vector v1, and that process will be happening for all the target vector in the population. Now, in the figure you can see that all the mutant vectors are shown in these green colors. So, that are generated using the formula that we know for mutation. After performing this mutation and creating the mutant vectors, now let us create the trial vectors. So, following the hand calculations, we use the formula and the tables which is shown in the trial vector. The solutions are shown in the pink color, as you can see here. So, these are the solutions that are created after trial vectors. Now, the process which is left is the selection. So, we have to either select a target vector or a mutant vector. Just for our reference, I am showing you both the solutions now. So, the target and trial vectors are shown. So, the blue color solutions are the target vectors and the pink color solutions are trial vectors. So, here the solutions will be compared and we have to select the best solution. Now, after selecting using greedy selection method, as you can see these brown points, these points are the new target vectors. So, what we can see that we started randomly in the x1 and x2 plane, and after one generation the solutions are start moving towards the optimum solution. Let us look at this particular solution. So, you remember that one solution was having a fitness close to 4. It is because this particular solution, as you can see in the figure, it is close to one of the local minima in this problem. So, this solution will be trying to converge to this local minima, but using the parallel search space property of evolutionary computation. The other solution will help this solution to come out and then move towards the optimum solution as it is shown in the red color. So, this way, generation by generations, these vectors will move towards the optimum solution for the problem. So, here we have come to the conclusion of this particular session. So, what we have learned in this session about differential evolution is, first we introduce the differential evolution. So, what we understood that DE is borrowed the idea from evolutionary computation. Why? Because it uses multiple solutions or vectors, and then the operations were performed to create new solutions. Those new solutions were compared and the best one was kept. Second idea was borrowed, which is similar to the vector operations in the simplex search method. So, borrowing these two ideas, differential evolution came with the concept of mutant vector. So, as we understand that this particular mutant vector was generated by taking a difference of randomly chosen two vectors multiplied by the scaling factor f, and this particular component is now multiplied with the third component for mutating the target vector. Once the mutant vector was generated, then we had a formula for a trial vector, where with the help of probabilities or the random numbers, we are taking the variable either from the mutant vector or from the target vector to create a trial vector. And we also showed the greedy selection of the canonical DE, and this says that the best of target or trial vector should be chosen based on the fitness value. Thereafter, we understood the flow chart of a DE. In this case, we had two loops. One is the decision space, decision box with respect to the number of a generation, another decision box with respect to the number of solutions in the population. So, after following that, we have fit the flow chart of a DE, or we have explained the flow chart of a DE. Thereafter, we fit DE on the generalized framework. So, in that generalized framework, we understood the operators and the processes what we have changed it, and then accordingly we created the mutant vector, the trial vector for each target vector I. Then we understood differential evolution using a working example. So, we took the Rosenbrook function, which has many local minimum, and it has one global minimum solution, and we have showed the hand calculation for one generation, and the same set of calculations which we did it. So, the same calculations we have showed in terms of graphical example. So, starting from the initial population to the mutant vector to the trial vector, and finally, the new target vector for the next generation, we understood how these vectors are improving using mutant and the trial vector operations, and finally, we can expect that after few generation DE will converge to the optimum solution. So, with these understanding and the concepts of differential evolution, I conclude this session. Thank you.